All right, 6.1, Principles of the Constitution. There are 7 of them that you guys need to know. We're going to go over daily focus, and then we're going to go through each one of the principles of the Constitution. Make sure that you guys are keeping up with your review. Make sure you guys are doing the reading. After the notes, you guys are going to do a worksheet over the 7 principles of the Constitution. The worksheet directly goes with number 8 on your review, so you should be able to finish the worksheet and then also work on number 8 and get that over with. Daily focus, number 1. What is one good word, or a good one word, synonym for ratify? That would be approve. Number 2, supporters of the new Constitution were called Federalists. Number 3, those opposed to the new Constitution were Anti-Federalists. Number 4, which French Enlightenment writer believed there should be a separation of powers in government? Montesquieu. Number 5, who defined English law and influenced the U.S. to model their courts after English common law? That was the judge from England with the huge book that he wrote. That was William Blackstone. 7 principles of the Constitution. I'm circling right up here. There's number 1, number 2, number 3 throughout the notes. Those will designate each one of the 7 principles, so you guys could see that. It's going to say the principle, and then it's going to say a short or sometimes longer definition, and then in italics, that is the red italics. Make sure those are the ones that go with examples from the Constitution. There's 7 total principles or ideas built into the Constitution. Each principle can be found in various places within the Constitution. So those are the red italics. First principle is popular sovereignty. Popular means lots of people. Think popular. Someone's really popular, lots of people like them, so people goes with popular. Sovereignty means authority. So basically it means authority of the people. The people have the power. People have the power in government. So we as the people allow representatives to make decisions for us because we have the power. Anytime we don't like the representative decision, or if we don't like the government's decision, we as the people should do something. We have the power in this government. Not a person, not a family, not anyone with a lot of money. It is all of the people all together. Second principle is republicanism. You guys have heard this a bunch. We've talked about this before. Republic, representatives, rep goes with rep. We have a republic. Technically, the name of our Constitution is a constitutional republic. We vote for representatives to make decisions for us. And we're held up to the Constitution. That's where all of our rules are. Third principle is limited government. Basically, we limit the government. We don't vote in the president and he has all the powers and he could do whatever he wants. Nobody is above the law. Obama, if he wanted to, could not get in a Ferrari and go 100 miles an hour down Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House. He's still not allowed. He still has to follow all the laws. All congressmen have to follow all the laws, or else they should be held accountable just like anyone else would. Everybody has to obey the laws. Number 4 is federalism. This is going to take a couple slides because federalism is a very difficult concept to grasp. In fact, it is a very difficult concept to grasp for even high-up members of the government. Federalism basically is a system of power that national government has power and state government has powers too. So the states are important, but also the national government is important. Some powers of government are given to the national government. Some powers go to the states. And some powers are shared, or if you see it right here, concurrent powers. Concurrent just means shared. So they could both levy or collect taxes. They both can borrow money. They both can do some things. Some powers are just for the national government. Some powers are just for the states. Still on federalism. Federal government has specific powers. It could tax, it could regulate trade, control currency, raise an army, declare war. Powers that need to happen for all 50 states that they could have. State governments have powers too, delegated specific powers that they have. They have the power to pass and enforce laws, regulate trade within their borders. So it's kind of like a mini inside of a state. They get to make all the decisions within that state. Also, they can establish local governments like cities and counties. Also, they could establish the school system and other institutions that affect the well-being of the people within that state. Example of this are like speed limits. There's no national speed limit. There's no national or federal law that everybody everywhere could only go 65 miles an hour. So every single state has their own top speed limit. So states can set their own speed limits. Another example is the school system. We all take the STAR test. That's a test only people in Texas take. If you go to a different state, you're going to take that state's test. What they learn in Texas might be different than another state. Obviously, last year you guys took Texas history. So in a different state, they're going to be taking a different kind of history when they are in 7th grade. Every education system is different in each one of the states because each state sets its own education. That's not a national thing. That's a power that remains with the states. Under the federal system, because we have basically two governments, we have a federal or national government, and we also have a state government working at the same time. So if you have two governments working at the same time, it gets a little confusing. So the final authority, the final say, is the Constitution. So no law or no state can make a law that go against the Constitution. Nobody can. Also, federal courts would settle differences between the federal government and the states. Example of this is the 10th Amendment. Basically, any powers that the national government doesn't have specifically then go to the states. And we'll talk about Amendment 10 later. Two examples or two things to help you remember federalism. Number one is this cake-looking thing up here. I always call it the federalism cake. It's a two-layer cake, so all one cake together, but the top layer is the national government, and the bottom layer is the state government. You can see national government on top, state government on bottom, so national is always going to be a little bit higher or more important than the state government. But altogether, this is the United States. This is our federal government. Also, I want you guys to write on your notes right now, I want you to put a F on your paper. Big. Write it big because you're going to put some stuff on it. I'm going to call this the Federalism F. It stands for federalism. But there's two lines to make an F. There's the top line right here and the bottom line. So altogether, one federalism, but two separate governments. Can you guess which government is going to go on the top? Boom, national. Write national on that top line. Notice that's the top line of the F. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit more important. On the second line of the F, state government. A little bit shorter, but it's still an important part of the federalism F. Number 5, separation of powers. We talked about Montesquieu already. Montesquieu is the guy in the Enlightenment, the French dude, that comes up with separation of powers. We took that idea and said, this is the way to do our government. We don't want one group or one person to have all the powers of government. So it divides the government up. So how did we do that? In the Constitution, we made 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Legislative branch is the Congress. Remember, it's bicameral, so there's a House and a Senate. Executive branch is the president. He carries out the laws. And then the judicial branch, the courts, they interpret the laws. Make sure you guys know. Makes the laws, carries out the laws, and interprets the laws. Legislative makes the laws. Executive carries out or executes the laws or enforces the laws. And judicial interprets the law. So they all have a role in laws. Makes, enforces, interprets. And you can look down here at the picture. You've got the legislative branch, which meets in the Capitol. Notice it's bicameral. On one side is the House of Representatives. On the other side is the Senate. So 2 bicameral working all together as one Congress. Executive branch, the White House, there's the president and vice president, and there's a lot of stuff that goes in underneath him. And then also the Supreme Court, judicial branch. Supreme Court is the top court in our national government. Number 6, very close to separation of powers. Don't get these mixed up. Once they're separated out, that's when we get the 6th principle of the Constitution, checks and balances. So basically what this does is balances out each one of the branches. If you look at that, I've got a check and I've got a balance. Each one of the three branches of government should be equal. Well, how do you make sure that they're equal? How do you make sure that not one branch becomes too powerful? What if the executive or the president decides he's going to start making the laws, he's going to enforce them too, and he's going to interpret them? Well, you don't want that to happen because that becomes more like a monarch or a dictatorship. So what they do in the Constitution is they put in various powers for each branch to check over the other branches. Each branch has roles that limit the other. For example, the lawmaking process. The Congress can't just pass any law it wants to. The president actually has to approve it. If he doesn't like the law that the Congress passes, he can veto it. Veto is basically blocking it from becoming law. Also, the Supreme Court can remove laws. So if the Congress passes a law, the president approves that law, it would become law. Unless the Supreme Court took a look at it, saw that it goes against the Constitution, and they could remove that law if they believe it conflicts with the Constitution. And we'll talk about that a whole bunch later on, because there's going to be lots of examples as we go from here on out to the end of the year. Congress, too, can override a veto. If the president's just being stubborn and he won't allow any bills to become law, they can, with a 2/3 vote of both the House and the Senate, all of the Congress together, can override the veto. So you've got all of these things happening where they could check the other ones. And you give certain powers to certain branches of government so where they could check the other one. Like declaring war. That's not the president. The legislative branch declares war. But the executive branch, the president, controls the military. So they have to work together to make sure things happen. And that's a good thing. You want all three branches working together. The seventh principle of the Constitution, individual rights. And those are those Bill of Rights. Remember the two hands, the 10 fingers, put those up. Those are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Guarantee our personal freedoms. And we're going to break this down. We're going to talk about this later in the week of what rights you have or what rights you don't have because you're under 18. But we'll get to those later on. Think freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, right to bear arms, all those things. We're going to get into those later in the week on the Constitution. Also, these rights, you need to understand too, just because you have certain rights doesn't mean you could do whatever you want, whenever you want. You can't just say, I have the freedom of speech, so I could say whatever I want. There's always limits to rights. You basically can't interfere with anyone else's rights. You can't cause harm, whether it's physical harm or mental harm, through your rights. Notice Bart Simpson up there. I will not yell fire in a crowded classroom. If you cause someone harm by your freedom of speech, you're going to be held accountable to that. All these rights have limitations. There's a responsibility that comes with these rights. You can't just say whatever you want, like disrupting class. You're not allowed to disrupt class. You can't just get up in the middle of class and yell profanities. That's not going to work. You can't just go outside of a preschool and start yelling a whole bunch of profanities. That's not going to work. You're getting in the way of other people's rights. So lying or dishonesty or causing harm, physical or mental, through your speech is abusing your freedom of speech, and you can be held accountable for those things. And we'll get into those much later on. We'll talk about all of the rights that you do and do not have later in the week. Remember, number 8 on your review deals with all of these 7 principles of government. You guys are going to do the worksheet now. You're going to cut out the specific thing in the Constitution and put it in the appropriate place. The meaning is there for you. Cut those out, glue those in the appropriate spot, and then fill in number 8 on your review. Whatever you guys don't finish is homework.